Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about fishing springtime, and this is the time of year it could be the greatest time of year for you. It can be the most frustrating time of year for you. The fish can be anywhere in any phase of the spawn. They can be in 2 feet of water on beds, they can be pre-spawn, they can be post-spawn. Sometimes they're difficult to locate, and sometimes they're very easy to locate. Most of the time it's not a situation where you're just going to happen on to fish and start catching fish. So there's some strategies that I use this time of year, and I just like to share these with you. Before I get going on this, you know, the way that I will approach different pieces of water could be different every day, and the way professional fishermen approach the same water may be different than what I do it. But I'm just going to share some ideas with you today, and we're going to talk about fishing this flat behind me. And you can take this philosophy and use it on flats, points, Tule Islands, so on and so forth. But today we'll be talking about fishing a flat, and we'll talk about the most important thing that I believe, or one of the most important aspects of springtime fishing, is how you approach a certain area. Now we'll talk about 2 different scenarios. One, approaching an area that you have never been to before. That will be the first scenario. The second scenario will be approaching areas that you already know about. And I'll start off by saying that most of the areas that become my #1 spots are not my #1 spots the first time that I go through them. Most of my #1 spots, when I first arrive at that spot, I've blown through and spooked fish out of the area. And think about this, guys, especially for you guys that may be thinking, you know, God, I'm hearing everybody catching fish right and left, and big fish, and I just can't find them. I'm fishing these areas. I see beds sometimes, but there's no fish on them. You know, I see small fish, so on and so forth. What you may be doing is coming into these spots a little too hot, coming in too fast and blowing through them and spooking the fish before you ever get a chance to fish for them. And that's why I'm thinking that the approach is very very important. Today we're going to talk about this flat that's behind me, and I want to talk about a couple of situations. And I already know this area. It's not a #1 area that I have, but it's a good area, and it produces fish for me every year. The first time that I came on this area, I spooked a couple of big fish off. I saw some small fish, I saw some beds, didn't catch anything. But because I moved into this area and I was able to maybe not be successful, but see some signs of life, I started to look around a little bit more. And on this particular flat behind me, it has everything that you would be looking for during the spawn. It has shallow water, it has some hard bottom that the fish can come up and actually dig beds and spawn on. It has some wood, underwater sunken branches and things that give fish cover. It's got some topwater vegetation generally, and it has a flat that moves out into 4 to 6 feet of water that has some hydrilla, some submerged vegetation, and then there's a drop off. So there's everything that you need. Now the first time that I came in here, I didn't know that. I was just fishing the bank, moved down along here, spooked out all the fish, didn't catch a fish. But what I did was, I saw the fish that I spooked, so I slowed down and I went in, I started looking around. I found a couple of places where the logs were back here. I moved out offshore. I found the vegetation that was in 4 to 6 feet of water, and then on the other side of the vegetation, I found that drop off. So the way that I approached this area the first time is totally different than the next time I came in here. After a few days later, I give this place a little time to rest, and as I approached this on the second day, knowing what I had back here, I approached it at a whole different angle. Right out in here within 30 feet of shore, it's only about 2 feet deep, maybe a foot deep at low tide. So what that's telling me is that that is a good flat. It's got enough water on it for fish to spawn. That's right out in front of us. As we go out a little further, it tapers off very slowly, and there is underwater elodea. That's the vegetation that we most commonly see out here. And that gives the fish a place to stage before they come in to spawn. Now, on the outside of that elodea, there is a channel, and let's just put this out here a little deeper. As you get out offshore, there's a channel and a lip that drops off, and that gives the big females plenty of security to sit out there in the deeper water and just kind of poke their heads in and out of here, watching the males, seeing what they're doing, watching the water temperature rise, seeing that the males are really into, digging the beds and finding a mate, and everything is right. That's when those bigger females will come up and they'll stage up either in the deeper water or in the 3 or 4 feet of water that has the vegetation, so they're not exposed to predators when they get in this real shallow water. When everything's right, they're going to come in, find the males, pair up with them, get their beds dug, drop the eggs. The males are going to fertilize them, and then they're going to get out of here. So when I'm coming into this area now, I don't go right along the bank because I know I'm going to spook everything out of there. I go offshore to where I know I'm going to be on the outside of the drop-off, which could be out here. What I do in that situation is, to find the fish, I may have 2 different baits on. The baits that I like this time of year are a chatterbait, and this doesn't have to be a chatterbait. It can be a square bill crankbait, it can be a lipless, it can be your favorite bait that you can cover water with. And the second bait that I like to use is just a Cinco. It doesn't have to be a Cinco, it could be it can be any type of creature, anything that you like that you can throw along the bottom and drag through beds. So the first thing I will do is, as I approach this area, I will start fishing it long before I hit the area where I think the fish are. At that point, I'm probably throwing chatterbaits, and I'm throwing, I'll be offshore throwing into the shallow water, but trying to cover the flats in 3 or 4 feet of water where there's vegetation, and I'll try to drop these either crankbaits or chatterbaits over that edge and fish into the deeper water. So fishing quite a ways offshore, hoping to find those big females that are staging, that are not yet up on the beds. Now, if I don't get fish in that situation, I may make another pass where I can get in and throw like a weightless Cinco, and that's going to give me another opportunity to maybe throw up farther, still staying offshore, maybe staging my boat right at the drop-off and making a 30, 40, 50 foot cast into the shallow water and dragging these guys through Cincos and slower moving baits through prime spawning territory. So with that, let's get into a little fishing, and we'll talk about a few different scenarios, and I hope that I'll be able to relay some information, that even little pieces of information that you might get as you start to fish into this spawn this year. You'll think back and say, you know what, here's a spot that I've been to before, and I know where the breaks are, things of that nature, and just start thinking about approaching the areas that you already know more cautiously, slower, and there's always you always have to think that if there are fish in the shallow water spawning, there's a road map to how those fish got there, and those are going to be the same road maps when they get done spawning. They're going to go out and find those areas that have the drop-offs and ledges that they're going to follow right back out to where they're going to spend their summer. That's going to give you an idea after they spawn where you should start fishing again. So let's get into a few different scenarios, and I'll kind of give you guys some ideas on what I'm looking for in each different scenario. Let's check it out. Okay, this first scenario is a very common scenario in the Delta. We were fishing. I was fishing with my partner Cam. We were in a flooded island, and we were simply running the bank, throwing our baits from the boat to the bank and reeling them back to the boat. On this particular day, we were using weightless Senkos. We were using T-rig Senkos. I think we threw a few drop shots, and we probably were throwing some creature baits. But this technique will work with any bait you may be throwing on any particular day, whether it's a crankbait, a chatterbait, maybe even a buzz bait. So we were being successful. We knew there were fish in the area, but as we worked these fish from the outside, we knew that there were more fish that weren't seeing our baits, and we needed to possibly take a different approach. So what we did was we caught a few fish, and we thought the fish were mostly in about a 50-yard section of bank. And you can see after I landed this fish, Cam almost immediately hooked up with another fish. At that point, we had a little discussion, and we decided that we were going to go back over the same bank that we had just fished. We're going to move in a different direction. We're going to hit the fish from a different angle. So let's take a look at what we were doing to catch a few more fish in that same area that we had just fished. We pulled in tight, and you can see there is a trough behind the outside tule berms there. Now, on our first pass, we were fishing the outer edge of those tule berms. Because we had fished this place before, we knew that at high tide, we can get in and fish in behind in these troughs. So we are fishing from a different angle. You can see we're pulled in very tight. We still have about 3 feet of water under the boat at high tide. And as you can see, by just simply repositioning and going at the fish at a different angle, we were able to pick up a few more fish. And I think we've got a fish catch here that we'll check out. And I just wanted to throw this one in there just to show that, changing your angle, going on the inside, maybe fishing parallel to the bank instead of retrieving it from the bank back to the boat can mean all the difference in the world. So we'll check out one more fish here, and then we'll go on to the next scenario. Again, just fishing plastic worms. We didn't change the bait, just changed the angles of what we were doing, and went to the inside and tried to pick up some fish that were holding a little bit tighter. Okay, we'll go over one final fish catch here, and this is just a catch where we are cruising down the bank and just burning a bank, and I pick up a fish here on just an offshore tule patch. So we'll watch this catch, but what I really want you guys to be watching is the tules in front of the boat up there about 20 yards. We have offshore tules, we have some tules that are just off the bank, and we also have some tules that are tight up to the bank. And what I want you to be thinking about as I catch this fish, if you were in this situation, you're approaching those berms out in front of the boat, how would you approach it? And I'm going to throw some arrows up there to point out some of what I would consider the prime holding areas, or where I might think a fish would be. So just think about approaching that and just not burning through there, but putting your boat or kayak in the proper position and hitting all of these prime holding areas so you can increase the catch, your daily catch. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we're going to sign off now. So get out there, fish the spring, and all I could say is you're going to have a good time. Good luck, and we'll see you guys on the water.